While it's hard to imagine Disneyland as having any kind of financial troubles, this was a major concern when the park was first being developed. While many of Disney's early animated features were critically acclaimed, the 1940s would see a series of misfires and misfortunes that would leave the company in dire straits. With a major animator strike in 1941, a series of box office flops, and the broader interruptions of World War II, Disney would need to have a major rebound in the 1950s if it was going to survive long-term. Walt himself felt that he had lost control of his staff and his studio. Because of this, he was eager to find a new pet project to satisfy his creativity. This would of course evolve into the Disneyland project, which would be incredibly expensive and a huge personal risk. Walt's idea would face a wave of naysayers, even from within his own company, who warned him that this would destroy him financially. But Walt stubbornly ignored the skeptics, focusing on several strategies to raise the necessary funds. One of these was getting corporate sponsors to financially support the park. Some companies would sponsor specific attractions, like the Richfield Oil Corporation sponsoring Autopia, or the Monsanto Chemical Company with its Hall of Chemistry exhibit. Others would operate their own restaurants inside the park, like the Chicken of the Sea pirate ship, or the Aunt Jemima Pancake House. Further still, a few companies would lease space for their own themed shops, like the Eastman Kodak Camera Shop on Main Street. A lesser-known example was Pendleton Woolen Mills, which sold woolen blankets and sportswear from its shop in Frontierland. But while Frontierland itself was a fictionalized version of the American West, Pendleton was a genuine piece of Western history. When Thomas Lister Kay arrived in the state of Oregon in 1863, he was looking to start his next chapter. As a weaver by trade, he had immigrated to the United States from England and had worked in textile mills along the East Coast. Having now made the grueling trek to the American West, Kay was eager to put his weaving skills to work. In 1889, he opened the first mill of his own, the Thomas K. Woolen Mill in Salem, Oregon. His daughter Fanny Kay served as his protege, and she soon became skilled in the family business. Around this same time, she married a retailer named C.P. Bishop. This would be a key turning point in the family business, as it would combine the textile craftsmanship of the Kays with the retail expertise of the Bishops. These skills would be passed on to their three sons, Clarence, Roy, and Chauncey, who would set out to start a new business of their own. In 1909, the Bishop's sons purchased a defunct woolen mill in Pendleton, Oregon. They would revive the mill itself as well as its original name, Pendleton Woolen Mills. The location in eastern Oregon was ideal, as sheep were plentiful, and the community was well connected by rail for shipping its products across the region. The mill produced woolen trade blankets for local Native American tribes, such as the Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Nez Perce. These tribes appreciated the soft and durable woolen materials, which were woven with intricate patterns and colors. The blankets were held in such high regard that they soon took on their own cultural and ceremonial significance. A few years after opening the mill in Pendleton, the company expanded with a second mill in Washougal, Washington in 1912. In the coming years, they would expand their reach even further, making a name for themselves across the Pacific Northwest and the western U.S. as a whole. In the 1920s, the company's products started to catch on with the American retail market. While men's wool shirts at the time were utilitarian and drab, Pendleton released new shirts in 1924 that brought color and style to men's clothing. By the end of the decade, Pendleton had a full product line of men's sportswear. After World War II, the company saw growing demand for a similar clothing line for women. 1949 would see the release of the women's 49er jacket, which would go on to become one of their best-selling products. Post-war America saw the rise of the middle class and a booming consumer market, and Pendleton became a popular fashion during this era. Meanwhile, in 1954, Walt Disney and his crew were getting underway with building Disneyland. While the park was being designed with fantasy and escapism in mind, the prevalence of corporate sponsors would be a constant reminder of the outside world. To mitigate this, Disney tried to pick sponsors that could blend in with the park's theming as much as possible. Given that Pendleton products were well known for their Western flair, it's no wonder that the company was invited to open a shop in Frontierland. As Pendleton itself has stated, Walt was a fan of Pendleton's fleece-to-fashion vertical manufacturing, which at the time included ownership of our own flocks and scouring facilities. He saw a fit for us in Frontierland as part of his vision of America's Wild West. When Disneyland finally opened to the public on July 17, 1955, it was clear that Walt's ambitions had paid off. Frontierland itself was in some ways a reflection of his personal love for American history. But in a broader cultural sense, Americans at the time were fascinated with the Wild West. Cowboys and frontiersmen were all the rage, from radio programs to the silver screen. Walt Disney Productions was airing its own popular television series, Davy Crockett, which was conveniently tied into the theming of Frontierland itself. With this in mind, it's not surprising that Frontierland was a hit with guests. The Pendleton store was a part of the land's offerings from opening day, and would become one of its staples over the coming years. The Disneyland store was an important turning point in Pendleton's history. This would introduce the brand to a whole new audience of consumers, especially younger adults with an eye for fashion. The store sold a wide variety of products, from the signature blankets and sportswear to other Western attire, like hats, belts, and boots. Many of the woolen items even had specially made tags for Disneyland, making them unique to this location. This store was also unique in the sense that Pendleton didn't usually sell directly to consumers. They typically sold their products wholesale to department stores across the country. The Disneyland store gave them some retail experience while also spreading the wealth across their business as a whole. As Pendleton explains, our Disneyland store was phenomenally successful. We had a unique way to share the bounty of the Disneyland store's sales. Visitors were asked for their zip codes, and credit for the purchase was awarded to their nearest Pendleton store back home. For example, residents in San Francisco may have seen Pendleton ads from Hastings, while residents in Sacramento may have seen similar ads from Jim Patterson. In this example, the ad reads, "Jim Patterson has the largest selection of Pendleton this side of Disneyland. If you buy your Pendleton at Disneyland, please mention our name and they'll give us credit for your purchase." While Pendleton's presence in the park is generally not well documented, we have at least one example of the brand being showcased beyond its store in Frontierland. In 1971, Disneyland held a 3-day event called the Cinderella Festival. As described by the Pomona Progress Bulletin, some of the most exciting spring and summer creations will be presented by 4 of the outstanding names in fashion during Disneyland's Cinderella Festival. The event is the first in Disneyland's history to be built entirely around feminine interests. The festival offered free Disneyland recipe books, guided tours of the park's flowers and landscaping, and a series of fashion shows throughout the park. Pendleton presented a Western style called the Casual Cinderella, which was showcased at the Golden Horseshoe in Frontierland. This was repeated for the second Cinderella Festival in 1972, though it seems the festival never returned again after that point. Despite this, Pendleton continued to thrive in the park for many more years. In the late 1980s, Pendleton shifted its business strategy to start opening its own retail stores. This would allow them to sell their goods directly to consumers, much like they had been doing in Disneyland for decades. By the spring of 1990, the company was managing 50 stores across the country, with plans to add another 20 by the end of the year. Meanwhile, the 1980s had seen a similar shift in the Walt Disney Company, which had started focusing more heavily on merchandising. One of the signs of this was the creation of the Disney Store, a chain of retail shops selling only Disney products. The first of these opened in Glendale, California in 1987. Just like Pendleton, Disney was operating 50 of these stores by 1990, with no sign of slowing down. Of course, this business strategy would also change the way that retail stores were managed within the Disney parks. As Pendleton explains, "Our partnership dissolved amicably when the Disneyland Resort shifted their merchandising focus to more Disney-oriented goods. The store closed in April of 1990. And with that, Pendleton's Disneyland store quietly came to a close after an impressive run of 35 years. 2 months after the closure, in June of 1990, Disney reopened the store as Bonanza Outfitters, a more generic Western-themed gift shop. While this was certainly the end of an era, Pendleton's business would continue to thrive on its own. Today, the company remains one of the premier brands of the Pacific Northwest, as well as a fifth-generation family-owned business. In many ways, Disneyland in 1955 was almost unrecognizable from how we know it today. As Walt himself famously said, Disneyland will never be completed. There's a reason why the park no longer promotes Monsanto chemicals, Dutch Boy lead paint, or Aunt Jemima pancakes. The times have certainly changed, and much of the park has changed along with it. But over the course of 35 years, Pendleton proved itself to be timeless, a rare example of consistency in this ever-changing landscape. After all, if a piece of the Old West can't handle a few bumps in the trail, then what can?